And we're back. It is today the 21st of Elul, the 7th of September, and after a long hiatus, as you went and sacrificed your life to visit the Alter Rebbe and the Baal Shem Tov in war-torn Ukraine.
There's no war.
No war, it's just torn up. Right? It wasn't war. We're back with Reb Hillel of Parich, page Tedvav, page 15. So, לפי זה מתורץ שתי הקושיות. So from this, from everything that we've learned, we now have an answer to both our questions. What were our two questions? What was the first one? Remember what the first one was? למה הריאות על העם הזה? What have they done wrong? Which we said they didn't do anything wrong. The Galus, the exile in Egypt, was not as a result of some sin. It was not a punishment. And the second question was, how could it be that the further along in exile you get, the more difficult it becomes? It should be the other way around. Because even if there was something wrong, so over time, you pacify, you calm down. So why is God continuing to punish ever strongly every day? Even that. So he says, שכשהגיע אברהם לתכלית שלמותו בברית בין הבתרים, when Avram reached the highest level of his possible wholeness in belief in God. What did that mean? It meant that he had gone beyond the appearance of the physical world, and he had come to understand that God was one, despite the fact that if you're living in nature the way that the world was living back then, we don't live in nature anymore. We'll talk more about that later. We don't live in nature anymore. Most of us don't anyway. So back then, when you were living in nature, to see God's unity, to see that God was one, that there is one creator behind all of this, meant seeing beyond the appearances of the natural world. And he had seen beyond it. And he understood that there was a creator. And not only did he understand that there is a creator, he also understood that there must be a connection, a direct connection between the creator and the creation, between God and man. He understood all this. So this was as high as he could go in what we called Shuinyan Pchinat Havaya Deltata, the understanding or the contemplation of the lower meaning of God's name Havaya, that he brings everything into being. So when he reached this wholeness, this completeness, this perfection of faith, you can't go any higher anymore. Meaning, to go any higher, he has to let you down a ladder from somewhere higher. There's no way you can do it by yourself anymore. So this ladder that's now going to be thrown down to him has to awaken above. And it's awakening now. And God is saying he's ready for the next step. And that's what we call the supernal, or the higher meaning of Havaya. And when would this be revealed? It will be revealed when the Torah is given. Why is it, we haven't talked about this yet, and we need to talk about it. Because we said a lot of things about nature, and we said a lot of things about Torah, but we didn't say the Ikar. How is Torah a step higher than nature? How does Torah reveal godliness at a higher level than nature? So it depends on what you're looking at. If you're saying, well, nature doesn't command you to do anything, or at least God, that's not true exactly, because nature does command you, right? You have certain commands, and it's not exactly true that somebody who doesn't have Avram's tradition, even though it spread probably over the entire world, but they don't come to some need to sense unity in nature. They also need this. What does Torah do that's different than that? Torah sets the stage for unity to appear in a completely different way. Completely different. How is it different? Because where's the unity in Torah? Where do you see the unity in Torah? that one God gave it. It was given by one prophet, one God, and that's it. But that's not where you see the unity. That you have to believe. What makes it difficult to believe in God's unity when you look at nature? The fact that there's so many species and they're so different from one another. What makes it difficult to look at Torah and say there's one God who gave all of this? The many opinions, the contradictions, all these things, they put you in a position where either, like a lot of people live in bliss, and the bliss in Torah is to not know the disputes, to not learn Shas.
Ignorant.
If you're ignorant of all, and if you're ignorant of how deep these disputes go in understanding the Torah, then you can live in bliss and you can say, clearly this is one Torah. But a person who's a real Talmid Chacham, the first thing he does is he shows how different the opinions are. First of all, you have to separate them. You have to say, this person is saying X and this person is saying not X. They're black and white, mamish black and white. And yet they were given by one shepherd. To believe that, that's why we have that story about Moshe Rabbeinu appearing in Rabbi Akiva's academy and listening to what he's saying and saying, I don't know where this came from. Until he says, I got this from Moshe Rabbeinu. This is from Torah. And here's how I learned it.
How can Rabbi Akiva get such a about this?
Then,
Yeah, you said the council
but that's also true. But the main thing there to see is that Rabbi Akiva doesn't know where, Moshe Rabbeinu doesn't understand. What does this got to do anything with me? Where did you get this from? He says, no, this is I got from Torah. So to see unity through Torah is a much higher level, because the unity we're searching for now is unity between opinions of people, deot. Just as their faces are different, their consciousness, their perspective, their understanding of reality and of the Torah is different. Right? But then you have to have, but if a person is truly engaged in Torah, then we say in the end, these are both the words of the living God. But to see unity there is completely a higher level than to see unity in nature. Today, I don't think anybody thinks, I don't know if there's anyone in the world who thinks that somehow the same laws don't govern all of nature. The only ones that don't believe that are actually from Jews, but for good reasons, and I don't want to get into that because it's not the topic. But any scientist today believes that nature is uniform, and what we mean by uniform is that if I test gravity here, I test it on Alpha Centauri, it's going to work the same way. There's no difference, right? But to say that about human beings with their consciousness, with their free will, to say that's much more difficult. So today, the struggle to see God's unity is not in nature. There is some struggle there. There's still things that need to be uncovered and discovered and so on. In fact, there's a ways to go, but to see it in human affairs is much more difficult. That's why we say, what is the Mashiach going to do? We all know that the main thing he's going to do is he's going to make peace. And so Rabbi Hillel, not Hillel the elder, but Rabbi Hillel in the Gemara in Sanhedrin says, En le Mashiach l'Yisrael shekvar chalu b'mei Chizkiyahu. The Jewish people have no longer a part in Mashiach, because they already tasted from it, they ate from it, they consumed it, this great spirit of peace in the time of Chizkiyahu. What did Chizkiyahu do? They made him into a taste of Mashiach. He brought unity. He brought unity. Who is missing the unity today? The ones that are missing the unity are the nations of the world. They can't see yet how to figure out, how to connect East and West. They can't figure this out. This is like too big a problem. They can't figure out how to unite the rich with the poor. They can't figure out how to unite different races. They haven't figured it out yet. They're trying all kinds of stuff. You see that the false messiahs that they bring up are like the progressive messiahs. Like all kinds of attempts. Well, we'll just ignore all the differences. We said a real Talmid Chacham, a real scholar in Torah, doesn't ignore the differences between Rabbi Ishmael and Rabbi Akiva. He knows exactly what the difference is. He knows exactly what Abaye and Rava disputing and why they have so contradictory opinions. He doesn't brush it under the rug. That's not what he does. He says, but there's a way still to connect them. What's the way that we connect them? So that's what we have Talmud for. That's what our whole way of thinking was changed in the time of Chizkiyahu. In that sense, Chizkiyahu, Beit Dino, they're considered to be the beginning, the very, very beginning of what we call the revelation of the oral tradition. There's a lot to be said about that, but we don't have time now. Okay? And because this new height that Abraham was now destined to climb to ascend to, was now being revealed above, it is what was the reason for the exile. Because exile really is what we call the disappearance of the previous conceptual scheme of the world. It was a way that they saw the world, and now it's changed. And we've talked about this a lot, that someone who wants the mentality, the conceptual scheme that people had during the Second Temple period to come back, and he wants to wear a jalabia, he wants to wear a headband, and he wants to look like somebody from 2,000 years ago. He doesn't understand anything about what the Geula, what the redemption is like. The redemption is here, this way, the way that we're dressed now, the way that we look now. It's got nothing to do with recreating the past. It will be a completely new conceptual scheme. Just like in the time of Avram, if somebody would come and say, these were the tefillin that Yaakov used, and he'll hold up his 2 sticks, whatever it was, and say, this is what it is, this is tefillin. And Moshe Rabbeinu comes down the mountain and he says, no, tefillin is what you put here on your head. It's made out of leather, and it's this. What are you talking about? We don't go back to that. That was the conceptual scheme then. Now we have the Torah. Same thing now he says. Vayistalkut hi beilui charilui. The previous conceptual scheme, the previous understanding of what godliness is, disappeared slowly. Ascent after ascent. What does this remind us of? Very interestingly. It's a beautiful story. You know who Chaim Gutnick is? Who is he? Please tell me. He's Australian or he's American? Okay. I think he's American. Anyway, so there's a story that was told about him recently. Maybe, I don't know. He's related, but I don't know how. I thought you knew. So. In any case, the story is that he apparently studied at Telz before he became a chassid or something like that. And they invited him back either for Yutet Kislev or something else. Telz Yeshiva in Cleveland. And he had a tight schedule. And so he flew there, I guess this is in the 60s. He flew there and he was going to fly back to New York. And the flight back was, late at night, but not so late. So he asked the Rebbe beforehand, if people show interest and they ask me questions and I need more time, should I miss the flight and stay another day or should I come back? I don't know what he was doing in New York, if he was working or whether he was working for the Rebbe. I don't know why he needed to be back. In any case, the Rebbe said, if you see that the questions are serious, then stay. It's worth staying another day. So he went and he taught. I don't think he verbranged, whatever it was. And at the end, there was one guy who kept him for a long time. And he kept asking him all kinds of questions. And then he said to him, I have a problem with Chabad. What's my problem with Chabad? Everything you do is fine. But my problem is, why doesn't the Rebbe ever consult with the other Gdoilim in the generation, the other giants of Torah? Why is he a one-man show? This is not the way of Torah, he says. We don't do that. Second question is, the Rebbe started his Nesius, his mantle of leadership, the Maimer Bati Legani. And what is that Maimer about? It's about a medrash in Shir HaShirim Rabbah. Almost no one knows, right? And this became the cornerstone of everything in this generation for him, of bringing the Shekhinah back down. How does he see that that's the major thing we need to do? How did he get to that? So Chaim Gutnick came back to 770, and the Rebbe wanted to hear what there was, and he told him these two questions. He thought they were good questions. The Rebbe said, the answer to one question gives a teretz, gives an answer to the other question. It's very simple. I'm the only one who sees. He's right. I'm the only one who sees that this is the main thing for our generation. And because of that, I have no one to consult with. No one else sees it the same way. Nobody else recognizes that the mission of our generation is to bring the Shekhinah down. If somebody else would recognize that, I could go consult with them what to do. But nobody else understands this. It's a beautiful story. It's very powerful. Like how did he recognize it, by the way? Because I think the Frierdiker Rebbe just finished with it. That was the last thing the Frierdiker Rebbe wrote. He couldn't teach it, but he wrote it. And so he took it as sort of like a will, like a marching order or something like that. This is the most important medrash now. Why? I said, oh, you're right. Only a Rebbe can say something like that. The Rebbe didn't invent this. But he recognized that what the Frierdiker Rebbe was saying was the mission of the generation. That we have to bring the divine presence back down into the world. We're the seventh generation needs to bring it down. So it doesn't matter. Seventh, eighth, ninth, that's inconsequential. What's important is the message. The message is that now is the time that God is going to reappear. That godliness needs to reappear in reality. And he says, because I'm the only one who thinks that way, who am I going to consult with? Nobody feels the same way. Everybody thinks that other things are more important. So I have to run it by myself. So this very much reminds us of the same thing, because before the Shekhinah came back down by Moshe Rabbeinu, it first disappeared. But here he's describing something that happened for a good reason. In Bati Lagani, the reason the Shekhinah ascended and disappeared was for a bad reason, because of sins. So it's Adam's sin and then Cain's sin and so on. They all pushed the Shekhinah, they pushed the divine presence out of the world. And then Avram, all the way to Moshe, they bring it back down. But the same thing, in a certain sense, happens for a good reason. That there's a new revelation that needs to come down. For the new revelation to come down, the old one has to recede. And it recedes in stages, he says. And as it recedes, further and further away from our consciousness, and we don't mean the physical world, because Hashem is the same, present the same way now as he was ever, always. But from our consciousness, his presence is receded. And that's why exile becomes more difficult, causing God to conceal himself even more, or seem to be concealed even more every day. But now he's saying to Moshe Rabbeinu in Egypt, now that the previous source of life for the world, we mean source of life like for the for comprehending God's presence, that's gone. The same thing is what happens at the end of every year. Right? At the end of every year, in the evening, it says that the light of the previous year ascends, recedes. And for a while, you're in Golus.
You eat the kugel.
What? Until you eat the kugel. This year, until you eat the kugel. And for those who don't know, this is a big deal. I don't know if it's a joke, if it's real. I have no idea. Doesn't matter. But everybody asks, if, like this year, the first day of Rosh Hashanah is on Shabbos, so, and we don't blow the shofar until Sunday, and that's the blowing of the shofar is what starts bringing down the new light for the next year. So how does the world survive for 48 hours until we blow the shofar on Sunday? So the answer was, you eat the kugel on Shabbos. The kugel does the same thing. So okay. Anyway, the pneumius of it one day, I think we started to explain once. Really, it's gefilte fish. It's not the kugel. You don't have to wait for the kugel on Sunday morning, on Shabbos morning. The gefilte means to feel. So the feeling is restored when you eat gefilte fish. That, of course, is all tongue-in-cheek. ועתה כשנפסק החיות הקדום לגמרי, דהיינו כשמקשים מציאות אלוקות לגמרי, ודבר הוויה שבעשרה מאמרות אינו מאיר כלל הדרך נעלמתי דומייה, now that Moshe Rabbeinu sees that nobody recognizes God anymore in Egypt. Even the Jewish people don't recognize him anymore. הוא סימן שהאור חדש במתן תורה כבר נגלה למעלה. That is the sign that the light of the giving of the Torah, which is a new understanding of God's unity, is ready to be revealed. And it's already been revealed above, ready to descend down. בשבע מידות דזהב, ואתה דווקא תראה, כי כעת יתגלה גם לנשמות דבייה. So in Atzilus they already see it. In the world of emanation they already see this light. Now they will see it also in the lower levels, in the lower three levels of consciousness called the world of creation, formation, and action. ואתה דווקא תראה, כי כעת יתגלה גם לנשמות דבייה, עד שכל הקליפות ייכנו וכולם יודו. And the sign will be that all the klippas, everything that opposes holiness, will fall apart. Its opposition will fall apart. And that's exactly what happened in Egypt as the light began to descend down. One way of thinking of the 10 plagues is not as something supernatural that God just did because he wanted to, but because this new light of Matan Torah, of the revelation of the Torah was coming down, it broke Egypt. And it broke it as it came down. That's why he says, and with a strong arm, he will send them out. He will throw them out of Egypt. And we will continue, God willing, tomorrow.
No. Yes, tomorrow.